I've never slept with a stranger, but this morning, I woke up in a billionaire's room, and he was making me tea. Amina opened her eyes. Soft morning light slipped through silk curtains. The scent of Earl Grey lingered in the air. Standing across from her was a white man, salt and pepper hair, white shirt unbuttoned at the collar, pouring tea into a delicate porcelain cup. She jolted upright, pulling the blanket to her chest. "Who are you? Where am I?" He looked at her, calm. "My room. You walked in yourself." Amina scanned the space. A crumpled bus ticket, a dead phone, ceilings too high, rich red decor, definitely not the budget motel she booked. He set the cup down gently, voice soft. "I think you should eat something before you decide whether to leave or stay." Amina stepped off the bus just after dawn. She dragged her old suitcase, handle taped together, shivering in the river breeze. The final stop was nearly 2 kilometers from the hotel. She walked to save the cab fare. Each street stirred up old memories of Savannah, like fragments from a different life. She was an art teacher in a small southern town. Low pay, no supplies, but her students, bright-eyed kids who drew like it was survival. She'd come back for her niece's wedding, booked the cheapest room on the app. No breakfast, no ocean view. At check-in, the front desk clerk smiled. "There was a system error. We've upgraded you to a suite, completely free." Amina frowned, but didn't ask. She was tired, and used to being left out of the explanation. She didn't look closely at the room number when she got the key. Her eyes stung from lack of sleep. All she wanted was a clean bed. The elevator doors opened to a thick, carpeted hallway, jasmine in the air. Each step felt like she was walking into someone else's life. The door unlocked easily. She kept seeing her niece's face, beaming in her wedding dress. Familiar faces, people she once knew. She didn't turn on the lights, just kicked off her shoes, dropped her suitcase, and curled into bed. Just like all those nights back home, living quietly, not bothering anyone. Sleep came fast. A rare deep sleep for someone used to staying up late grading drawings, prepping lessons, or, quietly, crying. She didn't know that on the other side of that door was a completely different life. Graham returned to the room past midnight. His tie came off first. His suit jacket landed on the chair, same rhythm as always. The room was dark, but he saw a figure curled in bed. He didn't startle, didn't panic. He stood there, watching the woman sleep. Loose curls spilled on the pillow. Her back rose and fell in steady breaths. For the first time in a long while, he wasn't alone. He didn't turn on the lights, didn't call the front desk, didn't ask questions, just walked to the minibar, poured himself a whiskey, sat in a chair across the room, and kept looking, not out of curiosity, but because he couldn't remember the last time he saw someone sleep that peacefully. He took a slow sip, set the glass down on the nightstand. The room stayed quiet, just her breath and the ticking of a clock. He removed his watch, folded his shirt, every movement careful, gentle, like breaking the stillness would shatter something fragile. She murmured something in her sleep. He couldn't catch the words, but the voice was real, slightly trembling, like holding on to something slipping away. One word rang clear. "Don't!" Then silence. He closed his eyes for a beat, laid a pillow on the sofa and turned his back to her. No real reason he didn't ask her to leave, just no one wants to wake someone who's dreaming safely. Before drifting off, Graham stared at the ceiling. His mind replayed the afternoon meeting, the cold handshakes, the veiled arrogance. Everything ran on time, on paper, on script, but none of it felt real. He reached into his pocket, pulled out an old photo, a girl, about 10, smiling outside a classroom. Curly hair, a grin that resembled someone. He slipped it back into his wallet. It had been a long time since anyone, accident or not, had fallen asleep near him. City lights filtered in through the windows. Graham shut his eyes. He didn't expect tomorrow to change anything, but tonight, at least, wasn't empty. Amina sat at the edge of the bed, still holding the blanket tight. He placed the tea on the table, nudging it gently toward her. "There's nothing strange in it, just black tea, classic." She eyed the cup, then him. "You should call the front desk, or the police." "I was going to, but you slept like waking up would break everything." She didn't respond. But something in her eyes softened. She reached for the tea, inhaled. Familiar, exactly her taste. "Earl Grey, no sugar." He nodded. Tea doesn't need to be sweet, just right. He ordered breakfast over the phone. 2 minutes, no fuss. She stayed cautious but had moved to the chair across from him, far enough to feel safe. What do you do for a living? Buy old homes, fix them, sell them to richer people. So, high-end real estate? Sounds fancier than it is. She laughed, first time that morning. He glanced at her smile but didn't say a word. When the food arrived, Amina froze. Corn fritters and soft-boiled eggs, just like home. You guessed my taste? I guessed. You like things with crisp edges but soft centers. She ate slowly, asked no more questions, but her eyes eased, her hands steadied. He sliced an apple, placed it quietly beside her plate. Do you always let strange women sleep in your bed and make them breakfast? Never, but this morning's strange. A quiet beat. Then he asked, If I'd been the one who walked into your room this morning, would you have called security? I would have made tea first. They locked eyes, then smiled. Not quite at ease, but something had started. Slow, human, real. Amina leaned back, swirling the now cold tea in her cup. Morning light filtered through the curtains, casting soft reflections on the table. I once got a scholarship to an art school in New York. My dream. She paused. But my father had a stroke. Mom couldn't handle it alone. I stayed. Graham didn't interrupt, just nodded, gently. That was it. No second shot. I teach poor kids to draw, but I still dream of a small gallery by the ocean, quiet enough to keep dreaming. She didn't cry, but her eyes never left the tea. He didn't offer comfort, just sat with it, like he'd heard something like it before, in another life. A long silence. Graham straightened up, then said softly, I had a daughter, with a black woman. Amina looked up. She studied design, brilliant, gentle, but my family didn't call it love. They called it a mistake. He gave a bitter smile. I didn't keep her. I didn't keep anything. Not the woman. Not my daughter. Amina didn't ask the girl's name or age, but something in her eyes said, I understand. He pulled out his wallet, laid a photo on the table, faded. A little girl with a big smile, wild curls, a face somehow familiar. She stared at the picture for a long time. Do you still talk to her? He shook his head. She lives with her adoptive mom. I send money, but I haven't seen her since she was 8. He tucked the wallet away. His tone stayed even, but his eyes didn't hide the weight. Not because I didn't want to, because I stayed silent too long. Amina set her cup down. I know that feeling. So quiet. There's no one left to listen. A breath, a glance, fragile as paper. No more words. But the space between them had moved. Not by talk, by scars. The kind you only show by accident. Graham held up his keys, gave them a small spin, then looked at Amina. If you're free, I know a place that might make this morning less strange. She hesitated, then nodded. They stepped outside. Savannah's streets still damp with dew, light breeze, car horns, kids on bikes, a radio from a bakery on the corner. They turned into a narrow alley. Murals covered the walls, houses, skies, a cat in a crown. Amina stopped. She reached out, fingers brushing a child's drawing. Crayon words scribbled underneath. This is what home looks like. She said nothing, but her eyes lit up, soft, sure. In a way Graham couldn't measure with numbers. She stood there for a while. Graham watched, quietly. A group of elementary kids passed by. One little girl, brown-skinned with braided pigtails, looked up and smiled shyly. Your art is really pretty. I didn't draw this one. That's okay, but you look like someone it could be about. The girl skipped away. Amina watched her go, hand still on the mural. Graham spoke gently, almost whispering. My company funds a summer camp here. Last year we had no director. She turned. You offering me a job? I'm offering you something near what makes your eyes light up. She let out a soft laugh. I'm not really the kind of woman big companies usually partner with. I'm not the kind of businessman who likes people who check all the boxes. He handed her a small card. No title, just his name and email. She flipped it over, then tucked it into her coat pocket. Do you often take strange women to see murals? No, you're the first. Is that true, or are you just trying to earn points? Both. She shook her head, smiling. The space between them no longer felt like it did at the hotel. They weren't lovers, not friends, just two people looking at something beautiful. on the same wall. They sat in a small cafe by the street. Amina's black coffee, untouched, still steamed in front of her. She stirred it gently. "I appreciate the offer, but I won't take it." Graham looked up, surprised. "May I ask why?" She met his eyes. Her voice wasn't loud, but unwavering. "I don't want to be someone's shadow, even if it's a famous one." He went quiet for a few seconds. No arguments, no persuasion, only his eyes shifted, like he'd just heard something he once thought no one would dare say to him. Graham rested his hand on the table. "It was never meant to be a publicity thing. Maybe not from you, but the world out there won't care." Amina took a sip of her coffee, bitter, but just right. "I don't want to spend my life proving I'm worthy of something you handed me." Graham stayed still. Outside, the breeze swept through the street. Dry leaves skittered beneath strangers' feet. "You're more direct than I expected." "I have to be. People like me don't get the luxury of being wrong." After a pause, Graham finally said, "I'm not disappointed. Just surprised." Amina gave a soft nod. "I'm used to surprising people. I'm used to people saying yes." He smiled, not defensive, just honest. Amina stood, slipping her napkin into her coat pocket. "Thank you again, for breakfast, and for the murals. The invitation stays open, if ever you change your mind." She didn't reply, just walked toward the sunlit street. Her figure disappeared into the crowd, but her words remained. Clear, sharp, needing no repetition. Her phone buzzed in her coat pocket. Amina stood at the bus stop, afternoon light streaking through her tangled curls. She unlocked the screen. A text appeared. "If there's a next time, I'll make the tea warmer." No emojis, no explanation. She stared at the words for a long moment. Her thumb hovered, but she didn't type back, didn't delete, just slipped the phone away. Fingers tightened on the strap of her fabric bag, like holding on to something unnamed. The bus hadn't arrived yet. People around her were growing restless, but Amina stayed still, eyes fixed on a path not drawn on any map. The words echoed in her mind. If there's a next time. It wasn't the offer. It was that someone noticed the smallest detail, the temperature of tea, something no one had ever cared about, except her. A breeze brushed her neck. She shivered slightly, but her eyes didn't leave the fading sunlight pooling across the street. Inside her, something delicate stirred. Not quite hope, just not ready to close the door yet. The ballroom was packed. Golden lights, clinking glasses. Amina stood next to Graham. Black dress, hair pinned up, no jewelry. A middle-aged woman approached, wine glass in hand, smiling faintly. "Would you get us another napkin? Table 9's short." Amina froze. Graham turned, about to say something, but the woman had already walked away. No apology, no glance back. Amina placed a hand over her chest. Something had landed. Not hard, but deep. Another man leaned in and asked Graham quietly, "Does she work here? She's quick on her feet." Graham gave a tight smile, didn't respond. His fingers tightened slightly on the stem of his glass. Amina looked at him, waiting, but nothing came. No correction, no gesture. She turned and stepped out to the balcony. Not out of anger, just breathlessness. The wind was strong. A single drop of wine slid from her hand, cold as the woman's stare. No one followed her. And for the first time, she felt utterly misplaced among chandeliers and fine dresses, as if she had never truly been invited. Amina returned to the table just as dessert was served. Graham's mother sat to his right, elegant posture, silver hair pulled high. She glanced at Amina with a paper-thin smile, her tone light, almost casual. "Where are you from again? Graham mentioned you lived outside the city." Amina nodded politely. "A small town, south of the state, near the public school district." His mother tilted her head. "Ah, that area's being redeveloped, isn't it? I've heard there are quite a few subsidized homes there." A sip of wine slid down Amina's throat, leaving no taste, just a bitter trace. The woman smiled faintly. "I admire people who rise above their circumstances. It takes character to maintain grace." Amina kept her smile, but her hands clenched under the table. Graham said nothing. He cut into his cake without lifting his eyes. Part of her wanted to stand up and leave, but another part, worn by years, told her to stay. She spoke slowly, clearly. "I haven't risen above anything. I live in it, and I live well enough not to be ashamed of who I am." Graham's mother sipped her drink, said nothing else, and under the soft lighting, Amina's smile became sharper than any retort. The party was winding down. People posed for photos, toasted, laughed loudly. Graham stood beside his mother, chatting with a group of investors. Amina lingered a few steps away. No one introduced her. No one asked who she was. She looked at Graham. He caught her gaze, then turned back to his conversation, as if nothing needed addressing. She hadn't come expecting protection, but for one brief second, she'd hoped for it. She left the ballroom before anyone noticed, leaving behind chandeliers, jazz music, and the table where she had felt more like a placeholder than a guest. Her steps were quick, but not rushed. The night air was cold. Her bus ticket was still in her coat pocket, old but not mistaken, and for the first time since that strange morning, she wished she had never woken up in that unfamiliar room with a man who brewed tea, but didn't have the courage to stand beside her when it mattered most. A news headline lit up her phone screen as Amina stood in the train station. Clean, bold text. Businessman Graham Hawkins sponsors unknown black artist from impoverished area. Beneath it, a photo of her and Graham, angled just right, light edited beautifully. But no name, just a cold caption, an art teacher from the South. Comments started to appear. Another PR stunt. Classic status play, predictable. Amina stared at the screen. But what she saw most clearly was herself, reduced to a headline. No permission, no voice. She knocked on Graham's door, didn't wait for an invitation. "You said you weren't turning me into a publicity piece." He closed his laptop. "I didn't send the story, it was the press. But they knew, the details, the photo. Someone at the event must have leaked. And you said nothing?" Her voice caught. "I don't need to be elevated. I need to be seen for who I am." She paused. "Are you buying empathy, Graham? Or do you think I'm easy to pity?" He stayed silent. She waited, but all the room held was the low hum of the air conditioner and her disappointment, settling once again in her eyes. Light rain in Atlanta. Graham stood before a pale green door, a small plaque beside it. Amani Brooks, teaching artist. He knocked. Moments later, the door opened. A young woman, about 20, hair tied high, the same face from the photo in his wallet, but her eyes, clear, unflinching. "Who are you?" "I'm your father." Amani didn't move. "Took you long enough." Graham couldn't find words. She didn't invite him in, didn't back away either. She just stood there, as if she'd spent years learning how to let things show up, without letting them touch her. "You could take me to lunch, or just listen." Amani crossed her arms. "You don't need to listen. The media already told my story. It's not like that. You just showed up once I became a headline." Her words landed slow, but not soft. "Mom waited. For a message, a reason. You said nothing. But now, when diversity and inclusion are trending, you're here." Graham stood still. No excuses. Amani looked at him once more, then closed the door, not slamming, but shutting, like a verdict that needed no words. Graham had already turned to leave when Amani's voice came through the closed door. "You're not a bad man, but you are a late one." He froze, didn't turn around. "I don't need to forgive you. I've lived long enough without a father, but the one who needs forgiveness isn't me." Amani's voice was steady, each word landing with intention. "It's her, the woman in the article, the one you cost something real." Graham turned his head slightly. The door stayed shut, but her words cut through wood, through years. "Do you think Amani was right? Can someone who arrives too late still deserve a second chance?" Comment below. Maybe Graham needs to hear it from you. Back in his car, Graham sat still, engine off. The rain tapped lightly against the windshield like a melody with no notes. He opened Amina's last message again. One word. "Thank you." No period, no emoji, but it read like a full stop. Amani was right. He hadn't been late for just one person. He'd been late for two. And if there was anything left for him to do, it wasn't to ask for forgiveness. It was to prove that silence wouldn't define anyone, except the man who chose it. Amina pushed open the door of the old classroom. The hinge still creaked the same way it had for years. No students, desks tilted, a stick of chalk still resting on the lectern. She walked slowly through the rows, fingers brushing worn wood. Each scratch recalled a face, a laugh, a dream once drawn in crayon. She sat in the back row, the seat she used after classes, planning lessons, eating cold sandwiches with tap water. No sound, but memory rang loud, clearer than ever. She opened her wallet and pulled out an old photo, yellowed with time. Her father standing in front of their wood-frame house holding a paint can, smiling, sun-warmed skin, shirt stained with white paint, just like hers now. Amina stared at it, lips pressed. I tried to do everything right, but right doesn't fix what's already lost. A tear landed on the photo's edge, then another. She didn't sob, just sat there, in that empty classroom, arms wrapped around the past, letting the pain flow in silence. Back home, Amina opened the mailbox, a handwritten envelope, no return address. Inside, a color photo of an old seaside building, shutter broken, paint peeling, but the afternoon sun spilled across the wall like it was waiting for a second life. Tucked in was a scrap of paper, hand-scrawled ink, slightly smudged. No flourish, no explanation, just one line. Want to open a gallery? You've got the key. She flipped the photo over. There was an address, a hand-drawn map. At the bottom, a rusty old key tied with a frayed rope, not shiny, not polished, but real. Amina stared at it, holding something more than metal, an unspoken apology, an unforced offer. She didn't smile, didn't cry. She just whispered to herself, "If I open the door, will anyone still be there?" The wooden door creaked as Amina stepped in. The smell of old timber and sea salt hung in the air. Light streamed through a cracked window. Dust hovered mid-air, floating like pieces of memory still looking for a place to land. The room was empty. Just stained walls, broken tiles, and a space so wide she could hear her heartbeat. Nothing about it was beautiful, and yet she felt lighter. She walked slowly, through the dust, the light. Every broken thing had once had color, every mark on the wall, a story. Her life, too, scratched but never broken. Amina stood at the center of the room. She turned in a slow circle, then stopped, hand to her chest. No one else was there, no cameras. But in that dull, filtered light, she was smiling. Not because of a man, not because of a gift, but because for the first time after so many wrong labels, she saw herself right. A bicycle stopped outside. Amina looked up. A young woman stood at the door, paint stains on her sleeves, backpack worn at the edges. Imani. She didn't speak right away, just stepped in. Eyes scanned the room, walls, floor, then Amina. I saw the article, and I figured the rest. Amina nodded. She didn't ask how she found her. She'd been waiting, not knowing for whom. Now she did. Imani stepped forward. I don't have a degree, but I can teach art, and I want to start somewhere people don't ask where you're from. Amina set the broom down, looked at Imani for a long time, not judging, just taking her in. Then she smiled. We don't need degrees, just hands that aren't afraid to get paint on them. Imani nodded. Her eyes held grit and gratitude. She dropped her backpack, headed to the corner, started wiping the walls. Amina watched, heart softening like a lyric without music. Let's start again. Together. No stage, no backdrop, just two women, once rejected, and a room, finally becoming the beginning of something good. Amina opened her email. Subject line, temporary suspension, coastal restoration permit. At the bottom, a red line cut deep. The project does not align with current tourism and cultural development goals. She reread it 3 times. No mention of her name, no technical reasons, just polite words. Cold, sterile, like white walls hiding the truth. A rejection dressed as red tape. At a community meeting, Amina sat in the back row. An older man stood up. We want that area preserved for white tourists. Street art projects might send the wrong message. Another voice chimed in. Unknown artists? Black kids painting freely? It'll look chaotic. Amina didn't speak, didn't argue, but every word felt like a nail driven into a roof still half built. A roof they'd never stepped under, yet felt entitled to judge. As if they owned the color palette of someone else's dream. Inside a sleek boardroom, fluorescent lights gleamed on a polished table. Graham's mother sat upright, voice even. If you continue backing that project, the Hawkins Foundation will withdraw funding from all your ventures? Graham didn't respond right away. He looked out of the window, at a city clean, quiet, and unwilling to make room for anything that didn't fit the old mold. Why? Because she's a black woman? Or because she's not from our world? She didn't blink. Because you're risking the family brand over a dilapidated house. Graham exhaled slowly. No, I'm standing up for something this family never had the courage to name. Justice. The next morning, a statement went out. Graham Hawkins resigns from the Savannah City Development Board. No press conference, no long explanation. Just one line attached. We can't build the future by locking the same doors we've left closed since the last century. Amina read the headline while cleaning a dusty window frame in the gallery. She looked down at her hands, calloused, paint-stained, and smiled. Not because he stood for her, but because he finally stood for himself. Amina sat cross-legged on the gallery floor, sorting through half-empty paint boxes. Sea breeze flowed in through the windowless frame, carrying salt and sun. A little girl walked in. Brown skin, curly hair and pigtails, a crumpled drawing in her hand. Miss Amina, I draw ugly. Amina looked up and smiled. Nothing's ugly if it's true to you. The girl bit her lip, sat beside her. I used to color characters with skin lighter than mine. I was scared they'd laugh. Amina didn't interrupt, just waited, and then, the girl whispered, But you're the first person who made me believe. My skin's not wrong. Amina rested her hand gently on the little girl's drawing, as if afraid to smudge the truth in what she'd just said. You know, it's your skin color that makes your art stand out? The girl nodded, then ran off, curls bouncing in the golden afternoon. Amina watched her go, her hand still on the scribbled crayon drawing. A giant sun, a curly-haired girl standing in the middle of the ocean. Not a perfect picture. But, for the first time, Amina saw herself. Not in a mirror, not through someone else's eyes, but through the gaze of a child bold enough to believe what grown-ups had once forced her to forget. Amina sat on the gallery floor, back against the wall, paintbrush in hand, a smudge of yellow across her forehead she hadn't noticed. Afternoon sunlight filtered through the newly installed window, lighting the dust in the air like quiet gold glitter. She laughed softly, not loud, not dramatic, just the sound of someone exhaling after the storm has passed. From across the room, Imani raised her camera. Click. No staging, no posing, just a woman smiling at herself. In the light of something she once didn't dare dream. Imani posted the photo. No hashtags, no tags, just a caption. She didn't open a gallery to be seen. She opened it so no one else had to live unseen. The post spread, quietly at first, then widely. By morning, it was everywhere. Black teacher transforms abandoned Savannah warehouse into a space for dreams. Comments poured in, not from critics, but from ordinary people. People who'd once been silenced, overlooked. Among thousands, one made Amina stop. Thank you for turning your shadowed corner into light for the rest of us. The gallery door chimed. Amina looked up, paintbrush still streaked with blue. Graham stood there. No suit, no businessman mask, just a man holding a rolled-up blueprint, and eyes that no longer dodged. He placed the drawing on the wooden table and unrolled it carefully. Detailed lines. Not just a gallery, but connecting rooms, a reading nook, open art spaces, seaside classrooms, a coastal community library. I didn't redraw your dream, he said. I just left space for it to grow. Amina looked from the plans to him. No anger left, no doubt. Just one honest sentence. I never thought anyone would help finish a dream I didn't even say out loud. She didn't speak right away, just studied the blueprint. The open lines, framed windows, expansive space, like a dream finally made tangible. Then her fingers landed on a tiny handwritten note in the corner. Art is not charity, it's dignity. She looked up at Graham, voice even, words deliberate. If I do this, I do it with myself. Not out of gratitude, not because of love, but because she had learned how to stand, after being pushed back too many times. Their eyes met. No one won, no one lost. Just a space finally wide enough for both of them to exist, fully. Would you dare expand your dream, even if your past still aches? Comment below, maybe you've stood at that same crossroads. Crayons tapped gently on the table. Red, yellow, every shade of brown. Amina stood at the front of the room, whiteboard behind her, a large sheet of paper hung between two shelves. Before her, curly hair, wide eyes, shades of brown and gold. Each child held a brush or marker, waiting for her first words. Today, we're not drawing houses. We're not drawing flowers. Today, we're drawing ourselves, and we're not allowed to lighten our skin. The room went still. Then whispers began. A little boy frowned. But my skin isn't the same as his. Amina nodded. That's the best part. Each of you has your own color palette. Laughter erupted as a girl held up her picture. Red, brown skin, purple hair. Another painted herself in deep chocolate, golden outlines around her eyes. Amina walked between the desks. She didn't correct, didn't fix, just nodded when a child dared to use their real color. She stepped back and took in the whole class. Small space, slanted light, stained walls, but full of life. And in that moment, Amina wasn't just teaching art. She was teaching something it had taken her half a life to relearn. That skin doesn't need permission to stay. Amina bent down to help a boy adjust his crayon box. He suddenly spoke, quiet but sure. You know, you're our art mom. She looked up, met his serious little eyes, dark skin, messy curls, shirt blotched with ink. Art mom? You didn't give birth to us, but we only draw real when you're here. The room paused. Even the brushes fell silent. Amina didn't respond, just placed a hand on his head, gentle, reverent, as if touching a title that didn't need an award. No one taught him to say it, but in that one sentence he'd named her entire journey. A local news reporter arrived during lunch break, with a mic, a camera, and an offer. We'd like to honor you in our Faces Changing Savannah series. There'll be a ceremony. Interviews. Amina wiped her hands on a cloth, glanced at the kids fighting over stubby crayons. She shook her head, calm but final. I don't need an award. The reporter blinked. Then what do you need? Amina smiled. I need colored pencils, unbroken cores, enough brown, enough black, enough yellow, so these kids don't have to keep borrowing someone else's skin. No spotlight could ever shine brighter than the way a child's eyes light up when they see their color on paper and know they're allowed to stay. That evening, the gallery was quieter than usual. The kids had gone home. Sunlight stretched across the tiles, waiting like breath. The door creaked open. Graham stepped in. No flowers, no grand gestures, just an old silver teapot and cinnamon tea bags. He smiled softly. I'm not here to save you, just here to make tea. Amina looked at him, her eyes stilled. She didn't speak, but in her chest stirred that memory of a morning, a stranger, a teacup, and two people who had no idea how far they'd go just to find what they truly needed. Amina stepped toward the door, fingers resting on the worn handle. If you're making tea, I'll open the door. She pushed it open. Afternoon light spilled in. Cinnamon filled the air. They stood side by side. No hand-holding, no promises. Just watching children run toward them. Hands full of color, eyes full of dreams. Hearts that had never been told their skin was the wrong shade. The tea wasn't hot yet, but this time... They had time to wait. Imani's first photography class began on Saturday morning. Old cameras, worn straps, scratched lenses. But each child held theirs like it was more than art, like it was truth. Imani guided them gently. How to focus, how to hold steady, how to press lightly. She wasn't teaching photography. She was teaching them to see, with eyes not shaped by adult judgment. One girl paused, holding her shot, then clicked. No cheer, just a small smile. Sure, that afternoon, the photo was printed. The paper still smelled like fresh ink. Amina stood in the gallery doorway. Light poured in behind her, casting a glow around her silhouette. She wasn't posing, wasn't looking at the lens, just standing, exactly where she belonged. A child ran up, handing her the print. You look like someone from a fairy tale. Amina stared at the image, not because she looked beautiful, but because for the first time, she looked whole, not blurred, not cropped, no one else telling the story, just her, in the light, with dreams growing behind her. The gallery doors flew open, warm yellow light spilled out, soft as breath on salt wind. Children ran in, arms full of sketchbooks, paint boxes, old cameras, shoes muddy, eyes bright. Some yelled hello, some just smiled, some said nothing, just stepped in like they'd found a place to exhale. Everything slowed, like real life had slipped into slow motion. Amina's voice rose, quiet but firm. I once walked through the wrong door, thought it was a mistake, thought I didn't belong. But that door led me right back to myself. Light stretched across the floor, and this time, no one was left outside. The kettle hummed on the wood-burning stove. Cinnamon scent filled the quiet room. Graham poured carefully, 2 old porcelain cups, one cream white, one chipped at the rim. The door creaked open. Amina stepped in. No words at first. She looked at him, then at the tea, then sat, fingers resting near the still-warm cup. She tilted her head, smiled. This time, you got the room right. No loud laughter, no embrace, just silence. Safe, enough, shared. A story closed, not with an ending, but with someone choosing to stay, not out of need, but because it felt right. Would you avoid the wrong door, or walk through it and find yourself? If this story touched you, leave a comment. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to help open more doors that seem wrong, but lead us home.